Good evening. It's number 138 of the Notcast. Today I'm going to be talking about the Pet Shop Boys' 12th album, Elysium, released in 2012, as well as the albums The Most Incredible Thing, it released in 2011, and the compilation B-Sides box set format, also released in 2012. But before that, I have to give you a public service announcement. Well, maybe it's not a public service announcement. I'm just going, I have no idea how many more of these I'm going to be doing. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I could be dragging it out forever and ever and ever, like Law and Order. And then Law and Order kind of gets divided down into the individual kind of sub-genres, sub-regions. Eventually you're going to end up with something like CSI Redditch. And I'm beginning to think that actually in Law and Order, they have actually managed to murder every single person in America apart from the people that work at the police station. Everyone else is dead, and it's all just a huge hoax to keep them running. Maybe the people that watch it, myself included on occasion, should take responsibility and be culpable in some small way for effectively a kind of creative mass genocide of the whole of America. And I don't quite know where that's come from. What you've often noticed is that I open my mouth whilst thinking. I think with my mouth open, and that's a very dangerous position to be in, so maybe I shouldn't. Anyway, today, Pet Shop Boys album, Elysium. Before we get into Elysium, there's a little bit of a preamble. A couple of things. I haven't mentioned this before, but I should have done. This is something I forgot to mention in the last episode. The first Pet Shop Boys single of 2010, released on Record Store Day 2010, 1,000 copies. A 7-inch of the demo version of a track that they wrote for another artist in 2002. The track is called Love Life. It is backed with a track called A Powerful Friend. And I seem to remember at the time Neil went on Twitter and asked anyone if they had a higher quality copy of the track than the one that they had, because they could only find an MP3. I never got to the answer whether they actually did find another copy of it, but nonetheless, the 7-inch single of Love Life is a rare and elusive beastie. It took me a long time to get it. I only got it actually last year during lockdown. It was originally, I think, probably about £7. It sold out pretty much within 5 minutes. It was then on eBay for upwards of £150, which I thought was absolutely redonkulous. And eventually, when it was the prices came down over time, I managed to pick up this copy. More than the £6.99 it was charged for on the day it was released, but considerably less than the £150. This one cost me £30 on Discogs. It was alongside a couple of other records, which I'm going to show you at some point. Pretty much one of my holy grails of Pet Shop Boys fandom is to get this record. It's not particularly good, actually. I'm not sure why it got a release, apart from the fact that at the time in 2010 everybody needed to do a Record Store Day thing. They hadn't quite worked out how popular Record Store Day was at that point, and therefore they were working out, well, what do we actually do? Do we do them in 1,000? Do we do them in 5,000? Do we do them in 10,000? The Cure, for example, have started off doing picture disc versions of albums, which they've settled at around 25,000 copies, which is quite limited. It's probably more copies than the actual Cure album would actually sell. Although the Metallica Black Album box set, which I will be reviewing when it comes out the day after tomorrow. I want to give myself a week or so to live with it before I review it for you. That is currently, I've seen numbers up around 52,000, which isn't actually that limited. Like the Paul McCartney limited edition album of the Russian rock and roll standards, which ended up selling something like 500,000 copies. Pretty bizarre, really, but there you are. Hang on a moment, something's fallen over, I need to pick it up. And we're back in the room. So today I'm going to be talking about 3 Pet Shop Boys albums, but also 1 Pet Shop Boys studio record. But the first one I'm going to talk about is this, The Most Incredible Thing. Hang on, something else has fallen over again. It's annoying me. So, The Most Incredible Thing. A Pet Shop Boys studio album in all but name. It was released in the summer of 2011. The 2011 was a very busy year for Pet Shop Boys, as I kind of mentioned, and you can probably guess from the t-shirt actually. They did a lot of touring, they played a lot of shows, And to cap it all off, they then released an album which was an 83-minute, largely instrumental soundtrack to a ballet that played at the Sadlerswell Theatre in London. First things first, the band started the Summer Tour 2011, the Progress Tour. They were offered a support slot on Take That's Stadium Tour in May, June, July, August, September 2011. Duran Duran had been asked if they wanted to tour supporting Take That in stadiums in the UK, and they declined because they thought that they were too important to support anybody else, which is a first world problem, isn't it? Whereas the Pet Shop Boys looked at it and went, well, Take That are playing over 30 stadium shows in the UK, and that gives us an opportunity to play to 3 million people in the UK over about 35 shows. And that's the biggest stadium tour that's ever happened in the UK. It's probably the biggest stadium tour that there ever will be in the UK. And that they decided, well, actually, that's a really good idea. We'll get to play to 3 million people. And bearing in mind, they've just come off the Ultimate compilation album. Their singles have just started to stop charting, if that makes sense. Together, the single that was off the Ultimate album charted at 58. So there was an element of the Pet Shop Boys starting to enter a new phase of their career, which I'll mention in more detail when we get to the album itself. But no, they did the 37 or so stadium shows supporting Take That in the UK, and then supported Take That in various stadiums across the rest of Europe. So they played to millions and millions of people, 45-minute shows. I went to one of them. It was a super condensed greatest hits version of the greatest hits tour, smaller, faster version of the Pandemonium tour, with the addition of the song Together. And it was just wonderful. The experience being in the stadium that day was effectively the moment that the Pet Shop Boys came on stage, and I think they started with Suburbia. It was just, it's a party. We're going to play all hits, all killer, no filler. And it was kind of like watching a super strength version of a Pet Shop Boys show to 80,000 people, wherever I was. Because bearing in mind, Oasis had split up at this point. So Take That was the band that people went to see to get drunk to with their missus that they couldn't take her to see Oasis with. So it was basically a crowd of drunk people with a party atmosphere. And Pet Shop Boys delivered a fantastic 45, 50-minute set of nothing but the hits. And it was wonderful. Absolutely great. Completely enjoyed it. And then I saw Take That, and that was completely great fun in a completely different way. But they came off that tour, and what's the record that they released? Well, they released two. The first one, as I've mentioned before, is the soundtrack to the ballet, The Most Incredible Thing, which was showed at the Sadlerswell Theatre in London in March 2011, and then came back in a slightly reconfigured form in 2012. It was also filmed by the BBC and broadcast on BBC 4 on the 1st of July 2011, which is on YouTube. I'll post a link to it down there. It's an instrumental album. The reason it has Tennant and Lowe on the cover and not Pet Shop Boys, by the way, I don't know if you can see that. Focus, you bastards. It is because the EMI Classics label, which this was released on, focuses on putting the name of the composer and not the performer on there. And the composers are Tennant and Lowe, not Pet Shop Boys. Although it does say that it is I think, what is it now? It says it's a complete ballet score performed by Pet Shop Boys and the Roclaw Score Orchestra, conducted by Dominic Wheeler. If you buy the soundtrack albums to films like Candyman, it says the music by Philip Glass, although Philip Glass probably didn't play on it. It was probably performed by someone like the Kronos Quartet, for example, or maybe the Prague Orchestra because they're cheaper. But it's still regarded as a Philip Glass release, and this is the same thing with Tennant and Lowe. That's the format which EMI Classics as a label released them on. That's configuration, so they stuck with that. It wasn't a stab at being any more serious than they already were. Although, if you haven't heard it, The Most Incredible Thing is a curious and interesting Pet Shop Boys release. It is 83 minutes long. The moral of the story is that you can't kill an idea, and there's some thematic imagery which appears all through the stage production, around the ticking of a clock, around the grind, work and slavery. Not necessarily slavery in an obvious way, but through paid employment and so on and so forth. It starts with a prologue. and the prologue, it contains elements of a lot of the other tracks. So the prologue was one of the very last things that was written. If you went to see a lot of films in the 70s, 60s, Star Trek the motion picture, it's a mad world, all those type of films. They've got almost like an overture at the beginning, which is a reprise of various themes which appear later on in the film. The Pet Shop Boys performance tour in 1991 had an orchestral version of the overture to Performance, which I mentioned in a previous episode, which they effectively used as an introduction to the band coming on stage, placing it in the realms of a serious work of art, darling. And the prologue contains the elements of the rest of the score. The first track, or well, one of the first tracks on it, is called The Grind, and the grind is obviously a word which is used to describe how incredibly boring going to work for about 1,000 days in a row can be. And the grind is based on a Yes era demo which is called Moronic, written by Chris, because he thought that the tune and melody was so repetitive and inane, it was moronic. There's also a track on there, track 6, called Physical Jerks, and Physical Jerks takes its name from the name for the exercises which the population are forced to perform in 1984, the George Orwell book, and later on the fantastic film that's incredibly depressing, starring John Hurt. There's also a track, The Clock, which runs in 12 parts through one part of every hour of the half day. So the clock comes in 12 parts. Part 5 is based around the 5 senses, so touch, smell, feel, sound, vision, that type of stuff. And track 7 is based thematically around the 7 days of the week and the 7 deadly sins, which ties in with It's a Sin, because It's a Sin, the video, which was directed by Derek Jarman, features the 7 deadly sins: greed, lust, avarice, jealousy, those type of things. And it also builds upon 7 4-bar musical motifs. By the way, you could probably tell I've borrowed this bit off another website, by the way. But it's a great little record, although little is probably not the best way to describe it. It's an unusual Pet Shop Boys record that really pushes the boundaries of what you might think. It's pop and it's art and it's pop art and it's all those things all wrapped together all at the same time, and it's a very, very strange record. It was released on vinyl. It's one of the very few, one of the 3 officially released Pet Shop Boys vinyl releases, which I don't have, because it was released in a made-to-order format of, I think, 6 coloured vinyl discs that was made to order. Yeah, you had a very short ordering window, and it cost something like £400 when it was released. Of course, it's now about £4,000 on Discogs, and there's only a few hundred of them around. The most incredible thing is a curiosity. It's worthwhile, but it's a curiosity. Now, the second thing that came out in 2011, and this is perhaps a little less well known, is this Subculture, which is a Swedish band called the Stop Modernists, featuring guest vocals from Chris Lowe. This is a cover version of the New Order track, which of course I love, because I love New Order, because I have fantastic ears and they work perfectly. But Subculture sounds like a great lost Pet Shop Boys single. In the tradition of great Pet Shop Boys cover versions, always on my mind, where the streets have no name, Subculture should go to it. It's quite minimal, it's quite retro, it's got a deliberately small sound, but it sounds fantastic. It's really great, and hardly anybody knows that it exists. So I'm going to post a link to it again in the comments. But it's effectively Pete Gledel, who's the Pet Shop Boys programmer, recorded the vocals. Chris Lowe did the vocals himself, and it was all stuck together by the Stop Modernists, and it sounds like a Pet Shop Boys B-side. It's really, really good. I strongly recommend this, although I have no idea if it is popular or not these days. Going into 2012, on the heels of the Greatest Hits tour, the Progress tour, came the release of this format, double CD of B-sides, although there was no such thing as a B-side, because for format, the conventional B-sides disappeared. So, for example, up to the release of the alternative album, every Pet Shop Boys track I think had been released on vinyl somewhere in some form. And there was, the 7-inch single was still very popular. The 12-inch single was very popular. The CD single had come to rule the world and cast all the imitators to one side. But format was reflects the changing in music delivery systems that had happened during the lifespan of the recordings from 1996 to 2012. The CD single fell out of vogue, downloads and streaming became the new black, and vinyl had a fierce resurgence. And by the way, did you know lead times on vinyl are currently 8 months? That's bonkers. Anyway, format is handily available double CD of all of the B-sides from the period 1996 to I think 2010 or thereabouts, 2009, covering the 13 years. And what you may not necessarily know, by the way, is if you look at the sleeve of that, the colours there indicate the dominant spine colour for each one of the respective singles. So, for example, if you start with let's think. We'll start somewhere, but you can identify. I think, for example, it is somewhere. What's that one? I don't know what you want, but I can't give it anymore. No, actually, that's somewhere because it came in multiple colours. I don't know what you want. New York City Boy. No, not no. The grey one's New York City Boy, for example. And then you've got You Only Tell Me You Love Me When You're Drunk. Home and Dry, I Get Along. Each single is represented by a colour on here, and it's stacked effectively as kind of like a collection of all the singles together. Format comes in this lovely little clamshell box thingy doodah. There's a booklet, as always. The Pet Shop Boys giving a booklet with interviews and discussions around what's on there, as well as the lyrics to the songs. Although actually I don't think the lyrics are in this one. The lyrics are on and then you've got 2 CDs, which effectively breaks down the covers again to make it a little bit easier so you can see which one's which. So this one, for example, this is the first CD. So maybe you start here with Somewhere, and and then the second CD, which opens with Always, which is the B-side of I Get Along, I think, is on here. And yeah, well, anyway, 2 CDs of B-sides. It didn't sell as well as alternative because nothing sold as well as a CD released in 1995 would sell. That's not really the point. The point is it's a fantastic B-sides compilation. It is, however, largely now obsolete thanks to the release of the double CD editions of the albums, which came out in 2017. So, 2012 started with the release of release I think is overstating it. A track called Invisible was made available on streaming services and to download as kind of like an almost first single by default to give people a kind of like sneak peek of a track off the new album. I wasn't playing that game. I want to hear albums in the order that they're sequenced when they're released, so I don't tend to consume songs before an album comes out. I just order the album and then I listen to it when it arrives. The first proper single that is given a physical release from the album is Winner, which was available as a CD, and a number of exciting and exclusive download options from various web stores, including 7 Digital. Probably compare the download, Woofer Music, Panda Shops, or whatever it's called, Panda Pops. Who cares? I'm making these up. They don't exist. But the standard and only physical release for Winner, apart from a very, very limited 7-inch that was, I think, a competition prize, was this CD single. Pet Shop Boys still doing CD singles. They still do it to this day because they understand that fans like music that they can hold and that they can touch. And Winner was a 4-track EP. It was backed with a certain Je ne sais quoi, a track called The Way Through the Woods, and a cover version of the Bee Gees' I Started a Joke, which had been a hit for both the Bee Gees and Faith No More in 1998, which is a bizarre song indeed. Winner is not the best Pet Shop Boys single. It was released, I think, quite cynically to tie in with the London hosting the Olympics in the summer of 2012. The Pet Shop Boys performed at the opening ceremony of the Olympics, which I believe was put together by Danny Boyle, and they played on like a moving, rotating platform, being cycled to the round of the venue by people wearing pointy hats. It was quite a surreal experience watching that on television. I mean, I could have seen them actually, because they played outside Buckingham Palace, which was about 10 minutes walk from my house, but they were only going to play for 10 minutes, and it was in the middle of the afternoon whilst I was at work, and to be honest, I didn't feel the need to do it that much. Winner is an okay Pet Shop Boys song and single, but it's got a very interesting approach to the lyrics, because yes, it ties in with the Olympics. It also ties in with things like X Factor, and ties in with things like game shows, and that old-fashioned phrase about competitiveness that we have on social media, which states that you're winning at life. Whatever winning at life is, maybe winning at life is showing you all my old Pet Shop Boys records. I don't know. I don't think about it like that at all. I feel like I'm a little geek going, oh look, I've got a thing. Let me show you about the thing, and oh, it's real. And well, anyway, Winner is a pretty good Pet Shop Boys song, but it's not ever going to be in anybody's top 10 lists of the best and most amazing Pet Shop Boys songs of all time. Incidentally, I know one of the people that's in the video for Winner. Hey there, if you're out watching, hope you're okay. As you know, we can't see your face in the video. We can see your legs, but I know you were there because you told me, and you wouldn't have a reason to bullshit. Because people don't do that. At least not my friends. So Winner is a pretty good song. Not amazing. Second single, and probably the first big push for a single from the album, was Leaving. Here's the 12-inch, and this got some proper releases. Leaving is the opening track on the album. It's a fantastic Pet Shop Boys song, perhaps not an amazing Pet Shop Boys single, because your idea of what a Pet Shop Boys single is largely involves a bit more banging and lasers. The 12-inch here has a beautiful inner sleeve, and it's pressed on a nice heavy vinyl. It's got the Lost Her Love remix, and then the B-side is the Happy Sad and Happy Hour remixes. And had the Pet Shop Boys heard the Happy Sad remix before the album had gone for mastering, they may have chosen to use that version instead of their own. To be honest, I can't see why the Happy Sad remix isn't that amazing, but it's pretty good. But Leaving is a very, very underrated Pet Shop Boys song. It's the first song on the album, and it's a song that's very clearly about death and dying and aging, but it kind of like ties up a metaphor about the death of a relationship alongside also the actual physical death of Neil's parents. Both his mum and dad died in the period leading up to the recording of Leaving, and the opening lines of Leaving are, the dead don't die, they just move away and they're with us every day. Can't remember the exact words. I'll get to looking at the sleeve booklet for the album. I'll get to that. But you know, Leaving is a great song actually. Maybe not a single, but a great song. There are also 2 CD singles. There was the Leaving EP here with a picture of what looks like Chris there wearing unusual headwear, because that's one of the things that he does. And it's backed with a track called Hell, one called In His Imagination, and a track called Baby. And Baby is a 2003 demo that is very briefly excerpted on The Most Incredible Thing, but it's released on this as a full track. Also, In His Imagination, the B-side, is based upon an early recording of I Started a Joke that the Pet Shop Boys tried. They then abandoned it, took the vocal off, and wrote a new song around Chris's instrumental version. So effectively you could probably sing the melody to I Started a Joke over His Imagination. I've never tried it, I wouldn't know. Also, my singing voice is not as good as I think it is. When I go to see a band and I'm at a gig and I think my singing voice is fantastic, I realise it isn't. It's still better than some of the singers that I've heard. I've seen the Happy Mondays and it sounded like a seal barking into a megaphone. The second CD of Leaving contains the Lost Her Love remix, the Happy Sad remix, and the demo version of Leaving. Again, this is I think Chris, he's wearing what looks to be an Undertaker's hat there, which ties in with the lines from the track Psychological, but also with the lyric that is about the death of a loved one. This was followed up with the band's album Elysium. Here's the it came in two versions. There was a double CD which came with the instrumental version of the album. The original double LP contained an instrumental version of the album. What you can see is there are two different photographs, by the way, on this. This is a shot of some clouds, and that is a shot of what looks like waves and water next to a beach. The idea being that the Elysium as a title is named after a park in LA, which was near where the band were recording, called Elysium Fields. And Elysium Fields also sounds like the word Elysium, which is not only the name of the best fields of the Nephilim LP, but also the Greek mythology of heaven, the place where the dead go that is heavenly. And I should point out that the opening track on the album is Leaving. The original title of Leaving, when it was a demo, was Heaven is a Playground. So the idea is, heaven and leaving do sound very, very similar when you put them all together. By the way, when Elysium was repressed in 2017 with the remasters period, it became a single LP. So if you want to get double LP with the instrumental versions on vinyl, you have to get a 2012 pressing. So let's go inside the vinyl LP and see what happens. Here's an inner sleeve, and that looks oddly heavenly. And that is the vocal version of the album, and this is the instrumental version of the album. The vocal version of the album has all the lyrics on, which means I have no reason not to quote them to you. And as you already know, I am very much a lyrics guy. It's a lovely pressing. I played it recently. I think maybe the sequencing on the album is imperfect. I would change the sequencing on Elysium, or Elysium, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But otherwise, it's a good Pet Shop Boys LP, although it is probably in my bottom two Pet Shop Boys studio albums. The bottom one very probably being Release, this being second, depending on my mood. The opening lines of Leaving are, "Our love is dead, but the dead don't go away. They made us what we are. They're with us every day. Our love is dead, but the dead are still alive in memory and thought and the context that they provide." Although the rest of the verse, it kind of intersperses the death of a relationship with the death of people, and the passing on the generational torch as sons become fathers, become grandfathers, and so on and so forth. Every Pet Shop Boys album is both a reaction to the album before it and the album that's about to come. The album before it, yes, bangers, lasers, flashing bricks, all great, straightforward pop tracks. The album after it, Electric, which I'll mention in my next episode, again, full on banging lasers, drum machines, bouncy bass lines. Really brilliant album, Electric. It's in my top 5. Elysium is in my bottom 5. That the two are counterpoints to each other. Both have E as the first letter, both have 7 letters in the title, both have cover art that reflects something that's extremely very blue indeed. In fact, I should probably break with tradition and show you the cover of Electric, which is there, which you could look at the cover of Electric and you could see effectively a series of blue wavy lines that looks oddly like waves and ripples, which is on here. So there, the album is, me as a question, there's the answer, or that vice versa. They are two halves of the same whole. But we'll probably should be talking about that when we get to talking about Electric. At the time the album came out, Elysium came out, I was staggeringly disappointed. Maybe I wasn't old enough to really appreciate the album for what it was. Maybe it's because it's grown on me over time. Also, I think the sequencing of the album is, to put it technically, higgledy-piggledy or topsy-turvy, depending on your point of view. It has a slow track, a slow track, a slow track, a fast one, a slow one, a fast one, and then lots of slow ones. It's really weird. The rhythm doesn't work for this. I would change the running order for this album. I would open with a Face Like That, and then I'd follow it up with Ego Music, Leaving, and then I'd follow the rough format of the album, but a Face Like That should be the first track on the album. It really gives the album a boost. It sounds like the opening track to an LP. It's got this big long intro. It's got about a minute of instrumental build, and then it goes straight into a vocal. You could be completely forgiven for although it's maybe slightly false advertising. A face like that should be the opening track on the album. And I'll post my alternate and preferred running order in the comments below. Yeah, so second track is Invisible, and Invisible is a brilliant song, but it doesn't work live, and it's a song that, this is an album to be listened to at home. This is not an album to be experienced in an arena or in a concert venue. This is the only Pet Shop Boys album that has been released since the band started touring that they didn't actively tour, which I'll kind of get to shortly. They put a tour on sale when this album was announced, and the tour was called the Electric Tour, and it started in May 2013, which was approximately 9 months after the album came out, which is not uncommon for Pet Shop Boys. But at the point that they announced that tour, that 9 months, they'd already clearly decided we're going to do another album, a follow-up album called Electric, that's going to be released imminently. And I saw one of the first shows on the Electric Tour at the O2 Arena in London. I think it was the fifth or sixth show. Electric hadn't come out yet. They played about 5 or 6 songs off Electric, which I hadn't heard, by the way. So as far as I was concerned, I was watching Pet Shop Boys on the Elysium tour, and I was surprised by how few songs off Elysium they actually played on that tour, because they mostly played songs from Electric. They did Axis vocal, they did Thursday with Example as a guest vocalist. I think they did Springsteen's The Last to Die as well. But I'm jumping ahead because Elysium is the album that we're talking about today, and the cover art is lovely, really. It is, but it kind of betrays and belies a kind of maturity which you wouldn't necessarily expect. By the way, this album came out before Bowie's The Next Day came out, so the idea of obscuring most of the main image with a huge white bunch of text, or a huge white box with a bunch of text on, was new at this point. It wasn't even an echo of the most recent David Bowie LP. This was a brand new concept, although I wasn't quite sure why anyone would want to obscure the photograph. And the instrumental version of the LP, as I've mentioned before, most bands produce instrumental versions of the LPs, which they then service to television, film companies and things like that, or also that they use if they're miming on TV shows or in-store appearances or things where they're miming or maybe doing a live vocal. So the instrumental version of all the Pet Shop Boys albums already exists. It's sitting somewhere on a hard drive. It wasn't hard to put out an instrumental version of the record, although it's very interesting to hear the instrumental differences, or perhaps the depth of the mix and the music that they had on the instrumental versions. So I'm going to get to the fourth track, which I haven't mentioned before, which is called Your Early Stuff. And Your Early Stuff is like Leaving is a song about aging, death, and people moving on. Invisible is a song about aging and death as well, and it was kind of inspired by a quote that Neil read, which said, if you're a 45 and a woman in Hollywood, you become invisible. To which Neil said, well, if you're 50 and you're a gay man, you also become invisible. Ties in with what I said many episodes ago about a U2 song called Invisible, which is as you get older, people stop noticing you. You start becoming seen as merely an old person, as opposed to somebody with something to contribute. You cease to exist in the eyes of many people in any way as a vital, dynamic, or sexual person. And so as you get older, people think that really what you're into, as I've mentioned before many times in a disparaging fashion, is golf and wine and cheese. And Invisible is a song which is very, very clearly around aging and changing. It also kind of reflected maybe the Pet Shop Boys' thoughts on their own career. As I mentioned before, Together had got to number 58, Winner, Leaving. These were not high charting songs. The Pet Shop Boys' days as a band that charted regularly in the top 20 had come to an end. Their core age and fan group, their fan base age, had probably moved into the mid-30s to the 40s, at this point. Let's say you were 15 when West End Girls came out, which means you were born in 1970. By the time this came out, you would be 42 years old, and you probably wouldn't necessarily be buying the CD single and the 12-inch single. You'd be buying the album when it came out, and you'd probably be buying it on a CD and playing it on a CD player in your kitchen. So Leaving is a song about aging and death. Invisible is the opening line is, after being for so many years the life and soul of the party, it's weird, I'm invisible. Whatever I've said and done doesn't matter in this chatter and hum. I am invisible. It's queer how gradually I've become invisible. Look at me, the absentee, disappearing finally. These are all lyrics about what happens when you become invisible, when people don't see you, when you're just one of the crowd, and when you've got a face like that, not one that could land on the moon, you just become just another anonymous face in a crowd. It's a really great song about growing old and aging. It's really miserable and depressing, but sometimes that's exactly what you need from your records, because if you didn't, why would you have anything by Radiohead? And as I've mentioned before, Winner also reflects around aging and competition and status. And your early stuff is again a song that's very clearly about age and what you used to be compared to what people think you are. And your early stuff is this wonderfully bitchy song from a cab driver going, you've been around, but you don't look so rough. And I still quite like some of your early stuff. It's bad in a good way, if you know what I mean. I love the sound of those old machines. I suppose you're more or less retired now. I think I read somehow that you've written a book or a film score. It's amazing that you lot come back for more. Those old videos look pretty funny. What's in it for you now? Need the money? They say the management never used to pay. Honestly, you got ripped off back in the day. Yeah, it's a song about effectively something that Neil heard when a taxi driver picked him up, taking him to Top of the Pops, going, well, what are you up to these days? I still quite like some of your early stuff. And he was like, well, I'm just going to appear on Top of the Pops. So, hey, stick that up your chuffer, as Mr. Trevis used to say. And then it's followed up with a track called A Face Like That, which is brilliant. I love A Face Like That. I think I've said before how much I like it. It's one of my favourite songs on the album. It should open the LP. And then the last track on side one is Breathing Space, which is boring. This is very definitely an album to sit and listen to on headphones at home while reading a book on a Sunday afternoon, and I don't care how bitchy that sounds. It's a good album, but it's by Pet Shop Boys standards by no means their best. Side 2 opens with Ego Music, which is a wonderful satire of, I think, the cult of personality that sits around modern music. I think it's completely about Lady Gaga, as Matt Berry would say. But it actually its cue from a quotation from Tony DeFries, the former manager of David Bowie, who said, "I like to think about David Bowie as being a building." And there's a line in Ego Music where he says, "I see myself as a building. My mind is the office where the work gets done. There's a nightclub in the basement when I needed some fun, and in the penthouse later, that's where the magic happens." It's probably no mistake, or perhaps no coincidence, that Lady Gaga, as some people may pronounce her, has an album called Pop Art, which obviously is the name of Pet Shop Boys' greatest hits album, released in 2003. Then the album kind of descends into a generally slow descent into mediocrity, with Hold On, Give It a Go, Memory of the Future, and Everything Means Something, before the final track, Requiem in Denim and Leopard Skin. I haven't got a huge amount to say about those songs. I think Hold On is it's almost like a response song to REM's Everybody Hurts, or maybe the Beautiful South's Hold On to What, which is, I think it was described by someone as like an anti-suicide song. Now there's a line in the song which goes, when you are lost in a fire that cannot burn, the concept being is that if you kill yourself and commit suicide, you spend your life burning in the fires of hell, which of course are fires that actually don't burn. If hell is real and not just an imaginary sky god. But that's a theme and a theory that sits alongside it. The theme of religion obviously sits in a number of Pet Shop Boys songs, and it's here there in Hold On as well. Memory of the Future was the third and final single from the album, which I've got here. Now, interestingly enough, the two sleeves are obviously of two different things, but if you put them together, I'm just going to quickly put that together there. See, look at that. That looks suspiciously like it could be Neil Tennant. That there looks like it could. If you squint up your eyes and you're drunk a bit and you manage to get the bits line up, that could be Chris Lowe, maybe. Who knows? But, the idea being is that you've got two halves of a whole. I think Memory of the Future is a good song, not single material, but a good song. And I got the feeling that for this album, the band were holding back some of their better songs for their next record, which, as I've said before, is electric and it's made of banging and lasers. And then there's Everything Means Something. And then the last track, which is Requiem for Denim and Leopard Skin. And Requiem for Denim and Leopard Skin kind of follows on from Nothing Has Been Proved. It's a list song that mentions a number of famous people: David, Brian Ferry, someone called Bieber, Ozzy's Last Collection, whoever that is, Johnny's Wearing Brothel Creepers, Malcolm's Round the Block, Adams in a German Film, The Look Is Let It Rock, a Johnson's Leather Jacket, Hair by Keith at Smile. All you need to make it big is sex and style. It's a song that's around a very specific funeral that Neil Tennant attended, and so therefore, it brings the album to a close, starting where it began, about death, mortality, aging, growing old, and staring the passing of time in the face. That's Elysium, Pet Shop Boys' umpteenth album, 12th studio album. Here's the double CD version of it. Again, the cover art is again slightly different. I bought this from HMV. I've still got a receipt. God, how retro is that? Buying it from an actual shop. Again, we've got the booklet with the lyrics in, and we've got the instrumental version of the album, and we've got the standard vocal version of the album. Every track has a vocal, and that makes a nice change. And I've mentioned the Memory of the Future singles here, which is backed with a track called Listening, One Night and Inside. The remixed version of Memory of the Future has an Ulrich Schnasch mix. Sorry, I mispronounced that, of course. Ulrich Schnasch is now a member of Tangerine Dream, or at least was at one point. And then there was, in 2017, there was a double CD version of Elysium that was released. Effectively, if you want to get everything, you do have to buy the 2017 version of the album and the 2012 double CD, which has the instrumental version of the album on as well. Further listening, 2011 to 2012 on here has previously unreleased vocals of Vocal, She Pops, and In Slow Motion, alongside the B-sides, Inside, Listening, Hell, The Way Through the Woods, I Started a Joke, In His Imagination, and then three remixes of Leaving, which are by the Pet Shop Boys, and the new version of Memory of the Future. It's a pretty good double CD, but it's not an essential release. I think Elysium sits at the bottom of the pack for Pet Shop Boys albums. That still means it's really bloody good. One of the great things about Pet Shop Boys is that they apply the same degree of diligence and thought to everything that they do. There is no such thing as a hastily dust off B-sides. They've thought about it, they've talked it through, they've given the record some considerable thought. I think it's a really good album. It's not the best. But not the best Pet Shop Boys album. It's still considerably better than almost everybody else's whole career. And I'm afraid to say, although if you are a fan of OMD, please do not dislike me for saying this, I think that Elysium, even though it's amongst my least favourite Pet Shop Boys albums, has more meaning to me than the entire of OMD's body of work. Sorry guys, not everyone can have number one place in my heart. That's where I'm going to wrap up. Thank you for spending 44 minutes with me whilst I talk about not the best Pet Shop Boys album. I'm going to post some links down there. I'm going to mention 2 live shows before we wrap up. As I said, Pet Shop Boys didn't tour Elysium. They played 2 shows. They played one show in Berlin as a duo with backing vocals on video screens, and they played another show with the BBC Orchestra in Salford in December 2012, orchestral arrangements. They've only played, I think, songs like Hold On, Breathing Space, Requiem, maybe 3 or 4 times. They did it with the orchestra show in 2012, which was a one-off in Salford. and they reprised the orchestra show in 2017 at the London Royal Albert Hall. And I saw that show, and it felt like I was watching the Elysium tour 5 years later. It was a brilliant, brilliant show. And when I get to talking about that, I will wax lyrical about how wonderful it was to see Pet Shop Boys performing a lot of rarely performed songs with a fantastic orchestra and Johnny Marr on guitar. Really one of the best Pet Shop Boys shows I've ever seen. I feel really lucky that I got to see a show like that, not just another standard tour stop, another day in the life of Pet Shop Boys. So, Elysium, named after a park in LA, but also the heavenly land of Greek mythology where we go when we die if we have been virtuous and true. The record is really good. It's not the best Pet Shop Boys album, but even not the best Pet Shop Boys album is better than many other band's best album. And I will wrap up here. Thank you for your time. And the next time that I do an episode about Pet Shop Boys, I'm going to be talking about what happened next, the Electric album, which, by the way, I absolutely love because it's full of banging and lasers. And thank you for your time, and stay beautiful. I will see you all again, hopefully sometime soon. Thank you, and bye.